Okay, so we have been handed an incredible deep dive today.
Hmm.
We're looking at a stack of sources that, well, they range from passionate grassroots advocacy and deep historical analysis to some really dense geopolitical financial reports.
And they all circle around one incredibly ambitious idea.
The creation of a unified continent, the United States of Africa, or UAfrica.
Right. And it's not just some political theory floating out there. This is being discussed now with a real sense of urgency.
Yeah, so we're trying to unpack why this vision, we're talking one currency, one military, no more colonial borders, why advocates think it's more viable now than in the first time around.
Exactly. And the sources suggest the answer lies in what has fundamentally changed in the global system since then.
Historically, African unity failed because of, well, a mix of internal division and a lot of external interference.
A messy combination, yeah. But today's proponents argue that the very structure of that external interference, the global financial system itself, is cracking.
And that shift, that crack in the system, might be the only way for true African sovereignty to, actually emerge.
And the timeline they're throwing around is
Aggressively optimistic.
very. We aren't talking about some far off goal like 2063. We are seeing advocates openly pushing to form a U.S. Africa as early as 2026.
So for them, this isn't some long-term dream. It's an immediate political project.
And what's driving that urgency is this palpable shift in energy. The modern groundswell isn't starting with presidents in suits.
No, it's starting on the ground
Yeah.
with the people. We see this really clearly in the sources that focus on repatriation efforts in West Africa.
Hmm.
They point to movements like Africans for Africans and the Made in Africa Project, both operating out of Dakar, Senegal.
And these places are being openly called a point of return for the diaspora. It's powerful stuff.
It's a movement that's just steeped in history and culture. You see these details about the Pan-African March in Senegal, with huge crowds of young people demanding control.
They're arguing that the systems they inherited are failing them, that they're still serving outside interests.
And the vision itself has been around for so long, it's incredible. The sources highlight the origin story for the USA for Use Africa Coalition.
Yeah, the founder, Mark K. Wood, he was inspired way back in 1987
By Muhammad Ali.
by Muhammad Ali, who linked the whole idea back to his Rumble in the Jungle fight in Zaire. He said for that 1 month, the continent felt united, that they had open borders.
That one anecdote, it just perfectly captures the emotional engine here. It's pure radical optimism.
And we're seeing groups use that momentum online, pushing for a single unified country by 2026.
And advocating for the immediate dissolution of those old colonial borders. They see the borders themselves as the root of the problem.
That kind of ambition is inspiring, but you have to look at the historical precedent.
Let's do that. Let's rewind to the 1950s and 60s. That first big push for unity right after independence.
Right. Ghanaian President Kwame Nkrumah's famous warning.
Africa must unite or perish. He saw a ticking clock.
He was right to see the urgency, but there was this immediate, deep ideological chasm that just stopped the whole project cold.
On one side, you had the radicals, the Casablanca group, which included Dana.
And they were demanding immediate political union, a single government, anti-Western, pro-socialist policies. Now,
And on the other side,
the Monrovia Group, the moderates, think Nigeria, Senegal. They wanted cautious cooperation, regional blocs, and, above all, they wanted to respect the national sovereignty they'd just fought for.
their motto was unity in diversity.
Exactly. So when they all finally met in 1963 to make this thing official, the Monrovia model won out,
And they created the Organization of African Unity, the OAU.
which was basically a cooperation framework. It had no teeth, no binding authority, no real integration. In Nkrumah's dream of a federal government, it died right there.
The sources are pretty analytical about the fatal flaws, what caused the whole thing to unravel.
And the first one is the most obvious.
The colonial legacy. Borders drawn in Berlin in 1884 that just sliced right through ethnic groups.
Creating countries that were just, fundamentally not viable, and crucially, their economic systems were all built to trade outward to Europe, not inward with each other.
And the second flaw was just immediate foreign interference. I mean, this wasn't a passive failure.
Not at all. The research we reviewed details allegations that the CIA, MI6, the French, they were all actively undermining any unity movements.
Sources allege Nkrumah's overthrow in 1966 was assisted by the CIA.
Right, because a strong, united, independent Africa was seen as a massive strategic threat to the old colonial powers.
Okay, so if the 60s drive was defeated by politics and kinetic action, Today's proponents argue the modern failure is financial.
It's a completely different battlefield. They contend that Africa just can't unite until it controls its own economic destiny, until it breaks the financial chains of the West.
And this is where the story takes a huge turn, because now we're talking about a global system.
And the primary financial chain, according to these sources, that's binding the global south is the petrodollar system.
To really get that, you have to look back to 1974, to a secret deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
Yep. The U.S. guarantees the security of the House of Saud with military protection.
And in exchange.
Saudi Arabia agrees that all global oil will be priced only in U.S. dollars.
This created what the French finance minister famously called America's exorbitant privilege.
It's a brilliant term because every nation needs oil. Every nation is forced to constantly acquire and hold U.S. dollars,
Creating a permanent, artificial demand for the currency.
which lets the U.S. run these enormous trade deficits. The rest of the world is essentially trading real goods and labor for printed paper, which then gets recycled back into U.S. Treasury bonds.
And the sources show that if you challenge this system, you pay a severe price.
Two really potent examples always come up.
First, Saddam Hussein.
In November 2000, Iraq announces it's switching all its oil sales to the euro.
At first, Washington kind of laughed it off.
They did, but then the euro started to rally. And then other OPEC members started whispering about maybe following suit,
And that was a direct threat to the dollar's dominance.
a critical threat. And then March 2003, the U.S.-led invasion happens.
And one of the very first things the occupying authority did.
Immediately switch Iraqi oil sales back to U.S. dollars. That sent a message to the entire world.
An undeniable message.
Yeah.
But the other example is even more explicit for African sovereignty.
Muammar Gaddafi's Gold Dinar plan.
Right. In 2009, when he was chairman of the African Union, he proposed a Pan-African currency.
And not just any currency, one backed by Libya's 143 tons of gold reserves.
And this gold dinar was specifically designed to destroy the French CFA franc system.
Can we just explain that for a second? Because it's key.
Right.
It's this post-colonial setup where 14 African nations are forced to deposit 50% of their foreign currency reserves into the French treasury.
Gaddafi called it one of the biggest scams in modern finance.
Because it hamstrings their ability to invest in their own development. It's a huge economic lifeline for France.
And the documentation on this is pretty compelling. The sources cite a declassified memo to Hillary Clinton.
And it explicitly identifies Gaddafi's Gold Dinar plan as a central reason for French President Sarkozy's push to intervene in 2011.
The financial threat was right there, the top of the calculus.
It's clear. Whether it's Saddam selling in euros or Gaddafi trying to create a gold-backed African currency, the response was swift and it was violent.
This history, it grounds the entire modern movement's belief that political unity is impossible without financial independence.
Which brings us to today.
The current geopolitical chaos, especially since 2022, is just accelerating this de-dollarization trend.
And the proponents see this as the perfect window, maybe the only window.
I mean, the U.S. freezing $300 billion in Russian reserves was a wake-up call for a lot of countries.
It was the moment they realized that their dollar reserves were just permission slips that could be revoked at any time.
So now they're building the mechanisms to bypass the dollar entirely.
You see the rise of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, now expanded with heavyweights like the UAE and Iran.
And the BRICS bloc has already surpassed the G7 in global purchasing power parity. They're building their own financial institutions like the New Development Bank,
But then there's China's specific strategy.
the Petro Yuan. Can we slow down and unpack that? How does it actually bypass the dollar system?
That's a great question because this is where it gets really clever. China, the world's biggest oil importer, launches a yuan-denominated oil futures contract.
Oh.
The key is this contract is linked directly to physical gold through the Shanghai Gold Exchange.
So if I'm an oil producer, say Saudi Arabia, and I sell oil to China, I get paid in yuan. What do we do with that yuan?
You have two choices. You can use it to buy Chinese goods or, and this is the genius part, you can immediately swap that yuan for physical gold.
No hassle.
No hassle. It lets oil producers sell to their biggest customer without ever having to touch a US dollar or a treasury bond. It's a direct, secure bypass.
And then you layer on the tech threat, central bank digital currencies or CBDCs.
Specifically, Project Membridge, which is run by the Central Bank of Central Banks, the BIS. This is the infrastructure that could just completely upend the global system.
How so?
Well, Membridge bypasses the SWIFT messaging system, which the US can block, and the correspondent banking system. It allows for what they call atomic settlement of huge international trades in seconds.
So it cuts out the middleman.
It cuts out all the middlemen. SWIFT might need 5 or 6 U.S. banks to clear a payment. Membridge is just a direct link between two central banks. It removes the U.S. choke point.
And this systemic cracking, this is the leverage the U.S.-Africa movement is betting everything on.
Everything. If the financial chains snap, they believe the political and military chains have to follow.
So the blueprint they have is clear. A single African currency, a unified military to end foreign interference, and this grand economic vision,
To become the world's first green superpower.
which is an incredibly forward-thinking idea.
It's a massive strategic advantage. They're proposing to just skip the carbon-polluting, smokestack industrial phase that the West went through.
And instead just leapfrog directly to their inherent advantages.
Exactly. The massive Sahara Solar Array project, the huge coastline for hydro and geothermal power.
So instead of making cheap T-shirts, they're positioning themselves to be the world's main exporter of sustainable energy. It's a total reimagining of their role.
But we have to ground all this ambition in the political reality of 2025, which is still, messy.
Right. Unity is happening, but it's regional, and sometimes it's even fragmenting the continent more.
Case in point, the recent formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES.
Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso.
It's a clear move toward confederation, but it's happening outside of the bigger West African bloc, ECOWAS.
So it looks like unity, but it's also a split from the bigger continental project.
And that tension is so important. Why did they leave ECOWAS? The sources suggest they see it as too slow, too open to outside influence.
It's the Monrovia model, not Nkrumah's radical unity.
That's it. The AES is showing they're willing to break away and get immediate, centralized security cooperation.
Meanwhile, on the official front, you still got the African Union. They've designated 2025 as the year of reparations.
Which is meant to address historical imbalances and fund future development.
And their big economic project is still the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area.
That's the official, slow and steady path. The centerpiece of their Agenda 2063. It's a sharp contrast to that immediate 2026 push.
Which brings us back to that date. Is there anything in the source material that actually grounds 2026 in reality, or is it just aspirational?
It's mostly aspirational. It's a rallying cry, but it serves a purpose.
Which is,
It drives home the point that the biggest hurdles now are internal, not external. We found this one powerful quote.
what was it?
Africa's leaders cannot unite Africa, the people can.
So that means confronting things like xenophobia, which the sources mention as a major threat, citing incidents in South Africa.
Yeah, the movement has to focus on a shared identity, on reclaiming economic sovereignty.
Specifically, they talk about land ownership and nationalizing natural resources.
Arguing the people have to seize control, targeting 80% national control to restore what they call lost dignity. Without that shared purpose, no political structure is going to stick.
So the whole Pan-African vision really hinges on two things happening at once.
Internal political will and the breakdown of external financial control.
The system that historically held them down is, maybe for the first time, starting to eat itself.
And that's the high-stakes issue that connects this whole project right back to you, the listener, because this push for de-dollarization is happening for a reason.
The staggering $35 trillion U.S. national debt.
Exactly. The dollar's global dominance depends on other countries holding that debt and those dollars.
But as de-dollarization speeds up, those dollars aren't needed abroad anymore.
The sources warn about the coming reflux of that money back home, a tsunami of green paper returning to the U.S. economy.
And that influx of dollars, all chasing the same limited amount of goods and services.
That's not just a little inflation. That's the beginning of the end for the American standard of living, as we've known it for 50 years, a standard supported by that exorbitant privilege.
So the ultimate question becomes about a power vacuum. If the slow death of the petrodollar forces the U.S. to retreat, if we can't afford the hundreds of military bases, the role of world police, what does that void look like?
Does the end of that dominance, the end of the Pax Americana, finally provide the essential political and military space for the United States of Africa to achieve Nkrumah's full vision?
It raises a really profound thought. Is American economic decline the necessary precondition for African sovereignty? That is something for you to mull over as you watch the headlines this year.